Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about the housing market tracker and the data that he thinks is going to be the most important as we go into 2026. Can't wait to get started. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Trust and Will, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
Is it Happy Barney's Day?
I cannot believe you say, before we got on, you were making fun of my sweater color because you said it was Barney. Barney's purple. This is pink. What?
That's pink? Man, okay.
It's definitely pink.
If you say so.
Okay, so today's topic, one of our favorites, which is the housing market tracker. We've been offline for a couple of weeks just because, you don't feel like that data towards the end of the year is really worth reporting on. It just kind of screws everything up. So you took a pause there, but it's coming back. And we are now at the third anniversary of you doing this tracker every single week with really fresh data. So tell us what we should look for in 2026.
The one thing about the tracker, I preferably would like to start the second week of the year, take that data line, but, this we'll bring it back up again. But what has the tracker done over the last 3 years since we've incorporated it? It has told you when markets are shifting, right? And I think the crazy part is that the craziest period ever in history for housing was the end of 2022 going into 2023, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, I want the tracker. Let me get this going now. You don't realize the data's turning. And I, couldn't do it. I was like, okay, I'll have to wait. But back then, home sales were crashing. We thought if home sales just stopped going down at 4 million, which it did in January of 2023, and the forward-looking data was getting better for 12 weeks, it gave us that one break. The supply and demand equilibrium shifted. 2024, supply and demand equilibrium shifted with the tracker data when mortgage rates went from 7.5% to near 6%. Even though the purchase application data was negative year over year, our forward-looking data was starting to improve on multiple fronts. It's very good for that. And then this last year in 2025, very happy with the inventory growth we saw early on. But by mid-June, this looks like it's changing. And, then you believe that markets changing when rates get below 6.64, and then the forward-looking demand gets better. And we said by 6 months, people might not realize the market has shifted from then. And now all the data lines show it together because, we're a few months ahead of everyone. But now it's 2026. Now you don't have the inventory shortage anymore or anything. You have a product out there that is still expensive in historical terms, but now you have lower rates, right? We're not starting at 7%. So the tracker is here to design to give everybody, it's more for professionals. We're not here for doom porn, and what we do is third-party regurgitation. We take other people's data and try to create a narrative. In your own areas or everywhere you're looking at, be able to learn how to read the data. So what we want to see is how does active inventory, new listings data, price cut percentages, the 10-year yield, purchase apps, all the forward-looking demand data, how does it all work together to create that enchilada so you can see this now going out in the forward, so you won't be 3 to 6 months behind like a lot of people have been each year, and then just kind of go with that because it's much different in 2026 than the past few years.
I think what I really appreciate about the tracker is that you are taking all those things and you're pointing out what's the most important thing, what's the theme of all of that data working together that week. So one week you might be like, hey, what's worth paying attention to this week is the inventory. And here's why. Another week you might be like, oh, it's the spreads. Like, look at what the spreads are doing. Or you might be looking at home prices, or you're looking at the 10-year yield and mortgage rates. And I feel like it's just such an up to the minute thing. And it helps people make decisions for their business, right?
Yeah. To be able to see how markets react. We just had 3 years, right? With 2022 had the fastest crash in sales, like vertical. Like in 2005 to 2008, it took years to get down there. Here it was like all in 1 year, and it was really the second half. But after that, everything changed, right? We had 6 to 8% mortgage rates in 2023, 2024, and 2025, but the tracker was very good in teaching the supply and demand equilibrium. And if anything really broke to the upside or downside, we'd be able to see it, but we kept it intact for everyone to read. And I think the number one thing is post-COVID, the seasonal bottoms in inventory typically happen a little bit later, and the seasonal tops in inventory typically happen a little later. That's a kind of a new phenomenon. However, last year, the seasonal top happened in August. That does not happen with our data. So the question is this year one of the years where the seasonal bottom happens early? We'll be able to see it in our tracker data before you get it in the NAR's existing home sales. And then we kind of go with that and see how it does. And how does demand react? In the old days, in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, inventory used to rise with sales, right? And prices, housing starts, they used to all kind of move together, but it's the post 2010, qualified mortgage world where things are a little bit different. So I'm hoping for somewhat of a back to what it used to be, rising inventory, rising sales in that regards. But we'll get to test case it because we no longer have the inventory shortage in terms of too many people chasing too few homes, the unhealthy housing market of 2020, the very unhealthy housing market of 2021. And the savagely unhealthy housing market early in 2022. That's all over it. So again, tug of war, right? And the best way to see the tug of war and what's happening is live, fresh weekly data. And with Altos and HousingWire, you get to do it in your own zip code, city and state, out there. My job is to talk about the macroeconomics and what drives the other variables of the tracker and everything, because of what drives economics really drives housing. Of course, everything revolves around the 10-year yield, but it's going to be really exciting because I think by the first three months of the year, you get an idea of how the year is going to play out, unless you get some kind of, 2022 was so abnormal with mortgage rates shooting up like that. But even just if mortgage rates went down 0.5% or even up 0.5%, you get to see how it impacts the data live. So you don't get shocked about, when the reports come out 2-3 months later.
I think inventory, you mentioned 2022 and the savagely unhealthy housing market. We saw, I believe in that year, that the highest point of inventory was like February or something like that. And then it just didn't grow. And so we got down to, for the entire country, the total number of homes for sale was like 240,000, right? For the whole country.
Yeah, the interesting thing back then in October of 2023, I was like, oh man, if this happens again, rates were getting, I was like, oh my God. I mean, excuse me, it was October of 2021. I was like, oh boy, this is a really bad setup. This is a really, really, really bad setup. And what occurred was, I think at one point, 87.3% of all homes had multiple bids. And we're not talking like 3, 4, 5s. There were homes that were 20, 30, 40. I think it was February of 2022 that I just threw up the flag. It says, I don't care. This whole thing has to explode, or else we're going to have another 17 to 20% home price growth year. It's going to really destroy future demand. And it wasn't even 4 to 5% mortgage rates that did it. It really needed 6.5 to 7.5% rates to really, really try to shut this thing down in terms of letting active inventory grow. But here we are, 2026. The NAR's report, December, will come out in January. We never really got back to normal active listings if we're using the NAR data. The normal, it's like 2 to 2.5 million. The November report was 1.43. We have one more month of decline. But we're in a much healthier market. Right? Inventory's up, more choices. It took a few years to get here, but because the days on market are growing, I was a big days on market fan. I never think anything good is happening with the housing market when the NAR's days on market are a teenager. And nothing good. You either have a shortage of homes, which we never had before until post-COVID, or you have too many people. Demand is so booming that it's just making the days on market. We don't have that kind of marketplace. That was the housing bubble years. But normal NAR days on market is 30 to 45 days. Everybody has their own days on market data. It's different for everyone. But we got to a teenager level. So I was like, oh God, no. But now it's better. Now it's that's why I say the theme is a tug of war. Buyers are finally in the ball game. They don't get to be dictated all the time. Sellers, of course, don't have any distress but they can't just sit there and just assume that everyone's going to give them their full price. And that's the tug of war battle that I'm so happy to see in 2026.
So, mortgage spreads were such a hero in 2025, but we're almost back to a normal level. So you're going to watch those every week, but what do you expect to happen there?
Mortgage spreads should be back to normal this year. It's one of these things where so many people were told that mortgage spreads were going to get a lot worse because the Federal Reserve is not buying mortgage-backed securities, or they were told that the spreads are just going to blow up higher for years now. And if you look back in the history of mortgage spreads, that's not how it's acted. And the Federal Reserve was not selling off mortgage spreads or mortgage-backed securities in the late 70s or buying them in the early 80s. So mortgage spread is basically doing what it traditionally does. And really, in 2023, after the Fed said, hey, listen, we're done hiking rates, we're starting the rate curve to get lower, volatility compresses, Mother Time helps mortgage spreads. And that's what's occurring. And because of that, we should get back to normal levels. And that's potentially 20 to 40 basis points lower. And then you want to see how the market reacts to a more stable mortgage rate, lower rate environment. Very exciting because we haven't been able to say that for some time. So there's a lot of interesting variables to go in 2026, but our job is to show them all, right? That's what the weekend tracker was. Weekend tracker isn't just an inventory or a pending sales data line or a price cut. It's the economics of housing, right? That's what I'm an economics person first, housing second. And I really revolve around the 10-year yield, but I can actually show everything all in one article every single weekend on what's happening nationally. And everyone can do anything they want with their own city, state, or zip code or wherever you want to keep an eye on.
I think that's the other thing I really appreciate is, so when we think about something like home prices, right, or percentage of homes that took a price cut, you set the stage every week and you're like, here's what's normal, here's where we are on that. And if the percentage is going too high or if it's about right, it goes a little lower. And then you provide the context of like what that means. So, home prices, price cut percentage, what do you expect for 2026?
Here's the thing, the price cut percentage, we're a big slope of the curve people. Like that's how we look at economics. And if you look at the slope of the curve and price cuts in 2022, it was super fast, right? Rates went from 3 to 7. That was stress. This is why I always say that the Redfin data doesn't actually account for the stress in the marketplace, because if you look at Redfin's chart that said it was the highest inventory or the biggest gap between sellers and buyers, there's the highest cancellation rates, delistings, all that stuff. It's a pretty stable year in 2026. I mean, there's really not much happening, right? If you look at it in the context of that, why do we have a boring year, right? And so, or in 2025, but in this year, the slope of the curve can't really move too much up or down unless you have like kind of a big rate move out here. Or if something happens where, let's say, new listings data really declined and inventory wasn't growing, right? The price cut percentages would be going a little bit or acting, the slope of the curve would be a lot slower, even probably maybe even negative year over year. So we want to keep an eye on that. And I think that's the exciting thing about live, fresh data. You don't get to do doom porn. You don't get to make these crazy headlines. The numbers speak for itself, but we have tons of things that all go in together, right? That's why we call it the enchilada. Everything is into one. Mortgage rates, 10-year yield, jobs data, active inventory, new listings, price cut percentages. What's the credit data doing? What's the credit data not doing? Federal Reserve, we put them all together. And because I have no life and I just do this 24/7, I get to explain it all the time.
You know what? I appreciate that you have no life, because literally I'm calling you at random hours going, hey, this just happened. What's that going to do to mortgage rates? Or, hey, what do you think about this? And because you are always looking at the data. Like, it's pretty scary, actually.
If you want to win, right, you got to put in the time. That's the thing. If you want to tell the truth, you got to put in the time and understand everything that goes on 24/7. No days off. So
that's true.
No days off.
I think your enchilada thing for 2026, maybe that's going to be your tagline. Something always emerges. We're never sure at the beginning of the year. Maybe you are, but like you'll say something and then it catches on and then people take it and like maybe it's the whole enchilada. Maybe that's
since we're talking about doctrines of government policy lately, let's bring the chart daddy doctrine for 2026.
Okay, no.
Is the tug of war. Yes.
If you want the Logan doctrine, I will go for that, but I will not go for the chart daddy doctrine.
The chart daddy doctrine is the tug of war between buyers and sellers, right? And we could prove it with the data, right? We saw the slope of the curve of the data lines are all showing that you don't have that inventory issue. There's enough homes out there. And most sellers are home buyers, but it gets to work on it live. It's so exciting because I think that's where the data becomes very useful. When things are going one way so aggressively, there's not much. It's a one-way direction. But it's the back and forth, right? The tug of war, right? Like in those old 1980 Channel 4 shows where they used to have tug of war between celebrities and all that stuff. Here we go, buyers and sellers. Let's duke it out.
Okay, listen, all you guys out there listening, you definitely, tug of war, you go for that. Please do not encourage the chart daddy doctrine. Please.
The chart daddy doctrine. No, I love it. I love it. That's what we're going to get shirts that go chart daddy doctrine now. Yes.
No, the Logan doctrine. That sounds good.
No, chart daddy doctrine. It sounds better.
No, I don't think so.
Of course you don't think so, Sarah Wheeler, because that's what you do. You're bossy. That's why your nickname's Boss. Logan, that's bad, Logan. No.
Listen, that is part of my job. It is. Okay, well, let's bring it back to economics here. Purchase application data. What are you saying there?
Here's the thing about purchase application data going out for the rest of the year. Now, in the decade in the past, it was it's somewhat a confusing data line, but it was very stable. You take the second week of January to the first week of May. That's the seasonal curve. And then after May, total volumes would fall. And then you just kind of run off how the year-over-year data worked. And then when year-over-year data was growing, existing home sales were growing. All hell just broke loose after COVID. This data line is completely whacked out. It's like clockwork orange. Nothing kind of makes sense. So I've had to do some major adjustments. What we want to talk about is last year was so unique because we're working from the lowest level. I mean, I cannot explain to you. We worked from the lowest percentage level baseline for purchase application data as ever when you take the total population and workforce right now. So just like the foreclosure data, take the year-over-year data with context, right? We had these 25, 26%, but they're just doing off of just a bounce off of new listings data. So we had these big year-over-year percentages, but we didn't see like existing home sales. Like just to give you guys an example, we were at 1995, 1996 levels with purchase apps at one point last year. Again, we always say gangster paradise, no doubt. Logan had blonde hair. Logan was auditioning for Levi's commercials. Then by the time at some point later on, we got to 2014, 2015 levels, right? Logan had dark hair, right? He was doing charts. It's much different. But sales didn't boom up. So the percentage of purchase application data needs context. Always keep an eye on the week-to-week duration, right? We need 12 to 14 weeks of positive week-to-week data to make it something legit. We get to start all over again in 2026 and we go with it.
We go with it. Oh, so exciting. Okay. Well, Logan, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for being that 24/7 chart guy. I give you a lot of a hard time about Chart Daddy, but I'm very thankful that you are watching stuff all the time. So we will talk again soon.
Pleasure, Sarah Wheeler. The Chart Daddy doctrine is in place now for 2026.
No, you guys don't encourage him. Don't. Tug of war, I'm fine with. Okay. We'll talk to you soon.